You're probably familiar with the fact that over the course of the pandemic, most countries or a number of countries around the world saw birth rates fall. I was saying earlier, China's birth rate fell something like 15%. The birth rate in the US is down as well. I think the same goes for France. But there was an interesting article in the National Geographic that came out at the end of last year that showed that the Nordic countries actually experienced the opposite. They're having a baby boom. So I want to quickly read just a line from the article and then get your thoughts on it. So the author writes, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Iceland have all maintained their birth rates, and some are puzzled to find themselves in the midst of a pandemic baby boom. After a staggering 16.5% more births than normal in the second quarter of 2021, Iceland has struggled to increase capacity in its maternity wards. Finland has seen a 7% leap in births, and Denmark and Norway have experienced 3 and 5% bumps, respectively. Sweden boasts a very modest 1% increase. All right, so Matt, quite honestly, I debated whether we should even bring you onto the show to talk about this because it's almost too easy of a setup. But I do think that there are some interesting threads to pull apart here. So what's going on? What could possibly account for this weird fact that the Nordic states experienced a baby boom during the pandemic?
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Yeah, they're not totally immune from economic effects driving birth rates. During the Great Recession, they all saw some plunges. Finland, especially, they had a double dip recession, so it's not as if they're like fully immune to that kind of stuff. So you would think, oh well, here's another one, and so that's it's kind of curious. Well, what happened here? Why did they zig where everyone else zagged, and where they used to zag? And I guess the difference is, it seems like, at least relative to their prior experiences, is with the pandemic, people have some confidence that things are going to turn around and pick back up, and they're not too worried, I guess, about the state of their life going forward. Whereas when you have a normal recession and you're unemployed and you're thinking like, how am I going to get a new job? And, is this a permanent hit to my career? Maybe it's a little bit more distressing. But in a pandemic situation, you're like, oh no, once this, washes over, I'll just go back to my old job. And then, relative to other countries, so not just relative to their own prior experience, of course, they have the most generous benefits. And, there are some interviews people have done, obviously, with some people doing this, and they're saying, well, like, look, I'm out of work right now. I might as well have them now, and get benefits if I do it. I don't have to worry about that. And so, if anything, it'll be good for my financial situation to go ahead and do this right now, both because I get the benefits and also because I don't really sacrifice any work time because I was already going to be off of work, for the pandemic.
So talk a little bit about the famed Nordic benefits more broadly. You've obviously come on the show in the past and have touched on this very issue. But what exactly do people in the Nordic countries expect to enjoy when they have a child?
Yeah, so I think you can think about a couple of functions, right? The first function is who watches the kids during the day and who's going to pay for that. So you have paid leave for the first year, typically, a little bit more in some of the countries, but you get a good 52 weeks of maternity and paternity leave, and that covers that. Then after that, you get heavily subsidized childcare, free for most, a small copay, capped at a very low level for people with high incomes in most of the countries. If you don't want to use childcare for ages 1 and 2 in Finland and Norway, and in some municipalities in Denmark, they'll just pay you to do, if you want to do your own childcare, then fine, we'll just pay you as if you're a childcare worker. Why not? After that, obviously, you get K through 12 school, which we have here as well. And then you also get free college, which I don't know if we think of that as a child benefit, but, the expectation in the U.S. for a lot of people is that the parents are going to cover that. So it kind of functions that way if we think about it in the U.S. context. So that sort of covers, the kids during the day, education, childcare, that kind of thing. On top of that, you get a monthly check in the mail, cover incidentals, food, clothing, that kind of thing. You get a baby box or a baby bonus, right when they're born, a big chunk of money. Or in Finland, they actually just send you a box of stuff. to kind of take care of the initial stuff you might need, cribs, bibs, stuff like that. And they get free healthcare. The kids get free healthcare. And the healthcare for the kids is more generous than the adults. Of course, we know they all have national health insurance. But, there's some co-pays and stuff like that for adults that usually aren't for children. The children don't have co-pays for dental either in some of the countries. So a much more generous free healthcare package for them. Childcare check every month. I guess that's kind of the overall gist of it.
I want to pause on the monthly cash benefit for a minute because obviously here in the US, the child tax credit ended last month. And I actually saw a report today, I think from Colombia, that pointed out that as a result of the expiration of the child tax credit, child poverty in the US could rise from around 12% to over 17%. So let's talk about the cash benefit, because you had written a piece a couple weeks ago about how one of Joe Manchin's objections to the child tax credit was that parents might spend the money on drugs or just otherwise not in ways not for their children. Take us through that piece. What actually happens when parents get cash benefits?
Well, and in terms of the empirical research, Canada is the easiest one to look to because they recently created the Canada Child Benefit. And what they were able to show with alcohol and tobacco, not illicit drugs, because those are hard to track, but alcohol and tobacco is probably a good proxy for that. That alcohol and tobacco use actually declines when people get child benefits, which is not, which is consistent with the idea that at least some part of alcohol and tobacco consumption is people coping with difficult situations. You make their situations less difficult and maybe they consume less of it. But that's definitely what they found in those consumption surveys, was that. Even beyond that, I mean, I make this point in the piece, it's not like cutting cash away from all kids and all poor kids. That doesn't really address the problem.
Right.
There definitely are parents out there who have drug problems, who have addiction problems, have gambling problems, who have all sorts of problems. And that's not related to whether they receive child benefits. People can be fully employed and be full blown alcoholic. I've seen it myself. So it's just a different kind of problem that you have, where you have some parents who may be unfit, maybe need some help, and maybe in extreme cases may need to be separated from kids. And the connection to that to should they receive income is just very, very tenuous and confusing. Like, right. Well, if they're alcoholic, they just shouldn't have money. It's like, well, how does that help the kid? The kid still, now I got an alcoholic parent who doesn't have any money. It's like way worse.
Right. All right, so I will let you go in a second, but I wanted to actually just circle back to the first question about the Nordic baby boom. I wanted to bring it up, obviously, as an excuse to talk about some of these issues and also as kind of like a human interest story. But I guess the last question for you is, should we care that the birth rate is down in the US? I mean, I know that a lot of people sort of think of a fixation on the birth rate as kind of like a right-wing preoccupation, but is there a left case for caring about the birth rate?
It's always like, it depends on how extreme it gets, I guess. For me, when I propose child benefits, I'm not really thinking about how many people have kids. I don't really care that much about that. It's just, if you have kids, and all kids as persons, individuals, like, should be taken care of. So if people don't have more, or even if they have less, like, that's fine. That's not a huge deal, and it doesn't undercut the case for the benefits, which is not all about promoting fertility. Right. There is a problem in the long run if your fertility gets too low, because your population becomes unbalanced, right? If a large percentage of your population is elderly, then it's a very big burden in a sense, because they're less able to work. The percentage of the population that's disabled goes up, right? Because that's concentrated among older people, and so you got to provide more care and that kind of thing. And that's not you don't want to go too far with talking about it in precisely that way, but people who are old and disabled need workers to care for them, and they come from subsequent generations. So if you don't produce enough, you can get into a bind.
If you like this video from The Jacobin Show, please hit like and subscribe and share with your friends. Thanks.